All right, so I'm seeing a lot of BS out there from freelancers, agencies, even some brands that are showing these crazy screenshots of like 5, 6, 8, upwards of 10% click through rates in their email marketing. And they're just beholding themselves as the gods who are not worthy of your time. Anyways, I won't jump into it. This is just a quick rant. But in this video, I just wanted to cover why your emails are probably not getting the amount of clicks that you're expecting or want, and how you can view CTR in the right way. Because really, ultimately, click-through rate is a vanity metric, like a lot of other stats that you see on a regular basis, but there are a couple things and ways you can view CTR on a regular basis to make better, actionable decisions on the kinds of emails you're sending out, the cadence of said emails, the offers that you're running, and ultimately a better way to re-engage and reactivate customers through the emails you're sending. So again, lend me some of your short attention span. Give me 5 minutes. I promise this will be worth your time. Cool? Cool. So before we actually jump into a couple examples and screenshots of brands that we work with, I wanted to just do the back and napkin math with you real quick to get aligned on what click-through rate actually is, because you'd be surprised if you don't understand the metric itself. You're probably not going to be as confident or be able to make the best decisions for you, your brand, the one you're working with, working for, whatever it might be. So real quick, I just want to do a quick example. Let's just say you've got an email list of 1,000 total people that you sent to in a campaign. You had 500 people open that campaign, and then 100 people clicked it. So if you want to find the open rate is just dividing the opens divided by the recipients. So in this case, you have a 50% open rate. Not bad. Then here's where a lot of people get mixed up. If you refer to the definition of click rate above, it is the clicks divided by emails sent, not clicks divided by opens, because a lot of people report in different ways. Obviously, Klaviyo, OmniSend, your ESP reports in the way I'm presenting here. But sometimes people try to fluff up metrics sometimes and say, hey, we actually had a 20% click-through rate. Isn't that amazing, brand? And that's not true. If you take 100 divided by 1,000, which is the true click rate, you actually have in this example a 10% CTR, right? Not bad. If you had a 10% click-through rate on average, you would not be watching this video. But again, for this example, that is what click rate is. So when you see the metrics in a second of examples of brands we work with, this is what I'm referring to with click rate, right? So let's actually jump into it. So for the next minute or two, I'm going to be referencing these 3 charts here of 3 completely different brands of, as you can see, varying sizes and varying click rates and revenue numbers. So we're all clear. The first column is opens, the second column is click-through rates, and the final is revenue as well as total orders, right? So this is what it's going to look like for all 3 of these brands. Now, what influences click-through rate? Take a second, think about it. Aside from the reasons why it's a vanity metric, there's a couple tiny things, 2 specific things I just want to call out of literally just treating it like a math equation is obviously the total number of recipients that you are sending to on a regular basis. It will influence the click-through rate, right? That is the denominator. So obviously, if, depending on the engagement, which is the next section or the next little point I want to talk about, but the total number of recipients will influence what your click rate is. Then we've got the total engagement of the people you're sending to, right? Because again, if you're depending on how engaged, unengaged your users are, that is going to completely reflect in the CTR, which is one of the big ways that we utilize CTR, which I'm going to cover at the end. But CTR is a directional metric to let you know, should we narrow our segmentation, i.e. send to people who are more likely to click, or can we widen our segmentation, right? There's reasons why you would narrow and why you would widen your segmentation, but ultimately it's, are we having some deliverability issues and some health issues? Let's narrow it so we get our stats to look a little bit better in the eyes of the Outlooks, the Yahoos, the Gmails of the world. Or does it make sense to widen it a little bit because we want to maximize revenue? And again, it's maximizing revenue. It's not being efficient with revenue. It's maximization, not efficiency. Something, again, we'll cover towards the end. But these are 2 influences of click rate aside from the content or the email content that you're sending. Now, you can see it directly here of why CTR is such a vanity metric is because it has no relation. And again, I say that with a grain of salt, but for this point of this video, no relation to the amount of revenue you're making. Let's take a look. I've got one brand here that is a little bit of a smaller brand. Their total engaged email list on a regular basis is around 60 to 70,000. They've got amazing click-through rates, right? We have very, very engaged people of this brand. But then the revenue, it comes out on the other end, anywhere from 3 to 6K on average. Then I've got a second brand we work with here. They on average send to over 300 to 350,000 on a regular basis, have pretty decent click-through rates. And look at the revenue. On average, again, we have some small sends, some normal sends, but on these are all pretty decent numbers. Again, from the total amount being sent to, the revenue shapes up to be pretty nice. And then we have another brand that is sending to about 20 to 30% less than brand number 2 here. They have a little bit better of click-through rates, right? About 50% better. And that gets it to a point where revenue is almost equal to this brand that is sending to 50% more subscribers. So why do all 3 of these brands have completely different results on a click-through rate level and then a revenue level? So one of the reasons, or I'm going to just run through all the reasons, but why click rate is a vanity metric is because there are so many other influences outside the email account that influence what click-through rate or how engaged people are going to be, right? The first one is actually just the category of the brand. So if you take a brand like bedding or home goods, where you're selling high ticket items that don't break, they don't go out of style often, it is just going to have a completely different engagement level compared to a single SKU gummy that is a replenishable, consumable. The buying cycle, the frequency of reorder is just going to be much higher, right? Also, depending on the size of the brand, if you are a HexClad and you're doing things with Gordon Ramsay and doing these massive giveaways and you're doing IRL, LA pop-up, New York pop-up, you are just going to have more content and more engaging things to talk about on a regular basis than, again, the single SKU gummy brand I talked about a second ago. Sure, you can have some nurturing content and education content and, hey, 5 ways you can use these gummies, how to pack it in your gym bag. You can do those kinds of, that is the content you need to lean into, but the category, industry, niche of the business will change how engaged users are just from that nature. A second is the demographic of the customers that you are acquiring. We work with a blue collar giveaway brand that sells merchandise in order to fuel these huge giveaways every 6 weeks. It's like $200,000 to $300,000 truck rigs. It's like a truck, tractor, trailer, and some other crazy wild stuff in between. So it's a blue collar worker that, funny enough, the best email send times are at midnight. They have some of the best engagement, lowest unsubscribe, lowest spam rate. You could send them 4 emails in a day and they'll never leave the email list. But then we have another brand we work with that is in the beauty space, and it doesn't matter how engaging the content is, how unique it is. If we are not coming out with new products for these customers, we see the unsubscribe rate just go much higher when we do these, tips for the morning, UGC collages, things like that. So the demographic, the people, the actual customers who are opening and clicking your emails, sometimes, depending on the brand that you run or are working with or for, the demographic of people is going to influence the click-through rate more than any offer or more than any design or copy you could do or write. So that's a really big important thing to keep in mind, and why you can't have crazy, random expectations to say, hey, marketer, I want you to give me 5% click-through rate. There's no rhyme or reason. It doesn't make sense. So you just got to keep that in mind. The demographic does influence click rate. Another is send type. When I talk about send type, I'll probably shoot another video on it in the future, but at Duh, which is the agency that I run, we work with 8 and 9-figure Shopify brands on customer retention and lifecycle marketing. The way we define it is there are 3 kinds of email campaigns. There are promos, there are hero pushes, and there are education campaigns. You could probably get the gist of what those are, even just by the titles, but the send type and also the frequency of how often you send each type will influence engagement. Simply put, if you send 3 education emails in a row where, again, they are here's the recipe, how to use it, here's reviews, that is never going to perform as well as a BOGO 2-for-1 or a huge offer or a Black Friday sale or a, oops, sorry, the website broke, have $50 off, right? The offer of an email or any campaign is always going to outperform some kind of evergreen campaign, one that is a normal hero push, education, nurturing kind of content. So the send type and the offer will also influence the click rate more than the copy and design ever will. And lastly, this isn't really something that proves click rate is a vanity metric, but one thing I wanted to note here is click rate is really just a proxy metric. It's not what we care about, right? Inevitably, we care about dollars in the bank, sales from the email. We care about revenue per recipient. So you shouldn't really get obsessed over click rate unless there's some kind of directional change, either really high or really low. We really care about what are the sales being generated and what is the health of the email list. Those are really the things we care about here, which actually gets me into the final point, which is talking more about how you can look at click-through rate in ways that you can track it month to month, week to week to make sure that it is in a healthy range, right? So first is one reason it's really good to use click-through rate and think about it is your deliverability, right? So deliverability, for better for worse, is really a black box for a lot of marketers. They're in the same way that you can test ad creative on Facebook. You can test the hook, the middle, the CTA, the offers, the upper thirds, lower thirds. There's things you can test, but Meta is never going to post a documentation of what the perfect ad looks like. Same thing with email. Click, the Gmails, the Outlooks, the Yahoos of the world, they're going to put you in the inbox, put you in the spam, put you in promotions folder based on thousands of different signals of how reputable you are as a sender, looking at the DKIM, DMARC, SPF, make sure the records are all properly there. What are the general engagement levels of opens and click rates and placed orders over time, and all sorts of other things. So while you cannot ever know the perfect deliverability, you can use different tools and metrics. Click rate is a great indicator directionally of how good you are doing, whether you are increasing click rates over time, meaning you are engaging net new subscribers in a really good way in the first 30 days that they're coming in. You're getting returning customers coming back, and they're jumping from a deeper cohort, like a 180 to 365 day engage audience, and they're jumping back to the 14-day engage bucket. These are all things you can track with click rate. Wow, the opposite could happen too. Maybe you're sending less emails. You should be sending 4 a week and you're only sending 2. Maybe you haven't done a really good offer in 3 months and your CMO or the founder does not want to run any kind of sale or promo because they don't want to cheapen the brand. Again, we know that that's not a legitimate reason to not do that. Anyways, I'll digress. But you use click-through rate to see directionally, are you getting good engagement from your email list or are you not, right? And while I don't like using, I don't like just saying things of like, oh, 1%, 2%, 3% is a good click-through rate. I will leave you with just a little tip is the 1% rule. So whenever I jump into an account, I would love to see it above a 1% click-through rate. And most of the time, again, some brands are different, it really depends, but lower than 3%. Again, like I told you from the beginning of the video, there's so many influences, so you can't really take this. I even showed you one of the brands we work with as a 5 or 6%, and that's actually really good. But here are just a couple things that I tend to see when it's above 3% or below 1%. So below 1%, you are just sending to a lot of people who are unengaged. Like, it's just a fact. The total number of recipients outweighs the amount of people who are eligible or should be engaged. So if you're sending to, for example, a 365-day engaged segment, you should probably narrow it to a 180-day. Or you should take out open rate from your definitions because you're landing in, maybe a lot of your users are Apple iOS users. So Apple is just automatically flagging emails as an open. So you've got an inflated open rate, which a lot of marketers and almost all brands have at this point. But if you're below 1%, you probably have a lot of unengaged people. Send to less. Just send to less people. Above 3%, again, it's awesome. You want to be above 3%. If we could have 10% click-through rates, that'd be amazing. But like one of the culprits, just an example I'll throw out here is potentially of bot clicks. Klaviyo and I believe maybe Omnisend has as an option, but there is a way they have bot recognition. You just go into your settings and you can toggle it to try to mitigate any bot clicks. But when I see really, really high click-through rates, it tends to come from brands that are over 10 years old. And they just have these old like company Outlook emails or Microsoft 365 emails where they're actually just either spam traps or bot traps where like they're just like inflating the clicks. And sometimes if you just go look at the audience breakdowns, you will see some people that click an email 15 times. So truthfully, your click rates can be way worse than Klaviyo is reporting and you just don't know it. So that is one of the bonus tips that I will give you here is when you jump into Klaviyo, that's the assumption I'm making is that you're using Klaviyo, you always want to check 2 different places at the campaign level. One is your deliverability. So right here, once you go to the campaign, you want to track your deliverability just ad hoc. Every 2 to 3 campaigns, take 5 seconds to jump in and just see what is happening because you'd be surprised how many times, even us, we are amazing at checking our brands, the Klaviyo accounts, and we have all these automations that to flag discrepancies of the soft stats, the hard stats, what have you. But sometimes you miss it. So you really need to watch this like a hawk because you don't know, maybe the dev on one of the brands you're working with, they just changed the domain or they did a redirect or they accidentally took out the record at the DNS level and you got to go fix that. Or you just had a huge influx of bots or bad traffic, or again, there's so many reasons, but just check your deliverability tab. Another is just the recipient activity. This is not one that I see a lot of people talk about, but whenever you're trying to diagnose some kind of engagement related issue, you want to go to the recipient activity and you want to check not just the profiles that are being skipped, you also want to check the ones that are clicking. Because from this level, you can actually click on the email, go manually check the profile itself and look for anything that seems fishy or suspicious, right? So those are just 2 bonuses on how you can check click-through rate and make sure that it is in the right range and checking to make sure that everything is going good under the hood. And that's basically it. So again, at the end of the day, just to recap everything, your click rate is dependent on so many things outside of what gets sent in the inbox. It's the category of brand that you are in, the niche, the industry, competitors, what you actually have to offer in terms of that content. It's the frequency or the repeat purchase rate of the products themselves that will change and affect the engagement of your regular campaigns. The send type, whether you're doing a promo, a hero, or an education push, as well as then it gets into the content and the offer that you're sending. And ultimately, remember, click rate is a proxy metric to show you how good you are doing at getting people engaged to then make a purchase, because that's what we care about. Revenue per recipient is the North Star metric you should be caring about, not click-through rate. You should not be trying to get click-through rates up for any reason, maybe aside from doing campaigns that I call click frenzy campaigns. I'll cover that in another video. If anyone wants to see what a click frenzy campaign is, feel free to comment below. But most of the time, don't worry about click rate. Unless you see a huge directional swing over a 30, 60, 90-day timeline going up or down, don't worry about it as much as you should be worried about the actual content, your campaign calendar, and the segments that you're sending to on a regular basis. I hope this was useful to anybody who's watching. And if you got any other things you want me to cover related to email marketing, SMS, direct mail marketing, building loyalty programs, I would love to shoot more content for it. So yeah, cool.